Universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. AI/robotics will produce goods and services far in excess of the increase in the money supply, so there will not be inflation. Hey guys, Ralph here from the Endgame Investor, and there's a tweet going around. Do you still call it a tweet or do you call it an X? I don't know what you call it, but it's from Elon Musk, and he's touting printing up a bunch of money and handing it out to a bunch of people to deal with the unemployment that will be caused by the AI revolution. And when it comes down to it, his argument basically is in line with Karl Marx's argument for communism, which suggested that communism would lead to ultra abundance of all kinds of stuff and everyone would be rich and we'd be in a Garden of Eden again. Did Marx say this explicitly? Maybe, maybe not. I never actually read his crap. But the communist revolution generally was trying to lead us to a Garden of Eden, and the communist revolution of the 19th and 20th centuries was just another version of looking for the fountain of youth and looking for the actual Garden of Eden where nobody would have to do any work anymore. But here I wanted to really attack Elon Musk's fantasy from an Austrian school perspective. Let's first read the tweet, and then we'll go into why it's so fundamentally wrong.
You thought wrong, dude.
The tweet goes like this. You've probably seen it. It's got 68 million views. Universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI. AI/robotics will produce goods and services far in excess of the increase in the money supply, so there will not be inflation. I wanted to take this from an Austrian positivist logical perspective and then back it up with some empirical data. From a positivist logical perspective, logically, this does not make sense.
That doesn't make sense.
Because what Elon Musk is talking about is the effects of inflation, about consumer prices. This is just the final order effect of increasing the credit supply over the money supply, which is the gold supply and the silver supply. The final order effects of increasing credit, which supercharges and lengthens the structure of production, is that it falsifies price signals, not just at the consumer level, but all along the structure of production. If anywhere the prices in the structure of production are out of whack, that messes up the entire production process. So you end up producing things that people do not want or need, and not producing enough of people want or need, and the entire economy is messed up and warped. If, for example, Elon Musk is right empirically that AI will increase abundance to such an extent that consumer prices will not increase, well, what about stock prices? What about real estate prices? What about all other prices that create speculative bubbles? Remember the 1920s, 1921 to 1929, when consumer prices did not rise or fall much at all. They stayed pretty stable, but stock prices and real estate prices went up like crazy. And then there was a big correction. And then consumer prices went way down. But what happened? People were poor anyway because all of their money and credit was stuck in the stock market and they lost everything. So the effect on consumer prices really did not have much to do with anything regarding the Great Depression. In fact, they fell during the Great Depression and still people were poor. And you know what? More than that, they were dumping food in the streets and milk in the streets, and real estate was being demolished because the taxes couldn't be paid. But more than that, logically, fundamentally, prices give signals for supply and demand of certain things above other things. They tell entrepreneurs where the profits are and where the losses are, what they should continue and to focus on producing and what they shouldn't. If the price structure is disturbed in any place along the structure of production, then the wrong things are produced, the wrong services are created, and government gets in and directs the inflation that it causes and supercharges it into certain industries like medicine, where we have a whole bunch of drugs that we don't want that are making us sicker, where we have a whole bunch of nutrition that is crap from the agriculture sector that the government incentivizes them to produce that make us even sicker. because the natural price signals do not exist in these industries, and you have immunity from liability from certain sectors of these industries that make everything even worse, and people die. Basically, inflation is not an increase in consumer prices. That is one possible effect of inflation. Inflation is a manipulation of the credit supply that warps price signals all along the entire structure of production. And when those mistakes are made, a bust happens. And then it doesn't matter how much productivity existed during the boom, that productivity is wasted because what money does, it divides the division of labor and helps distribute goods and services throughout the economy in accordance with where the money is and where the signals are. If there is a whole bunch of abundance, but there's no way to divide goods and services because the money doesn't work, because the price signals are all messed up, then the goods and services cannot be distributed through the economy at all. This is exactly what happened under Mao's Great Famine in China from 1958 to 1962. It's not that they didn't have an abundance, it's that they didn't have any working monetary system in order to divide that abundance among the country, among the people, and 45 million people starved to death. That is what would happen in a Musk regime like this. Wouldn't call it a Musk regime, but whatever he wants to call it, where the government hands out a bunch of checks and fake credit in order to have a claim on certain products and services that AI produces. Eventually, you end up in a world where nobody really has to do anything because AI can just process dead people into Soylent Green and you can just eat that and you don't have to do anything, and the government will provide the rest of your expenses, where life will be death and there will be no point in living anymore. But let's go into the empirical argument. Why does this not make any sense, and where have we seen it before? Obviously, the numbers are not going to be the exact same as to what Musk is presenting here, but the concepts are identical.
Identical.
And by the way, if you enjoy this analysis, then check out the Endgame Investor on Substack, where I wrote about this in detail. And if you want some real money before everything goes to hell, then go to Miles Franklin and mention the Endgame Investor. Link in the description below, and get a dirty man safe so you can hide some of your real money, some of your gold and silver somewhere on your property or off your property, wherever you want. And don't tell anybody about it. Use the code Endgame10 at checkout for 10% off. Let's go back to the 1920s and 1930s and see what happened then. Well, Elon Musk wants to say that AI will increase productivity by so much more than the money supply that everyone will be rich anyway and it won't even matter, and government can just hand out a bunch of credit as claimants on the new products and services that AI produces. Well, if we look in the 1920s, from 1921 post World War I to 1929, there was a depression in 1919 and 1920 because of the inflation of World War I. So we're just going to skip that part and go to industrial production from 1921 to 1929. These numbers are more honest than industrial production numbers that we get now because money was gold back then. It was $21 an ounce, or was it 2060, or let's just say $21 an ounce of gold. So these numbers show more of what was actually being produced, or the quantity, rather than an inflated money supply. So we have here April 1921, an index of 3.796. I don't know exactly what this is measuring, but we're just using this as a heuristic here. July 1929, 7.9436. That's a 2.1 times increase. So that's about 110% increase in industrial production in the 1920s. That is huge abundance throughout the whole country. There was a lot of wealth here being produced in the 1920s. And what happened in 1929? Well, I think we all know what happened. Now, Musk also makes the argument that that production will outpace money supply growth. Therefore, everyone will be wealthy and the government can hand out a bunch of checks. But if you look at Murray Rothbard's table for the calculation of the money supply from 1921 to 1929, same time period here. This is from the book America's Great Depression. You can find it on Mises.org, free on a PDF. So you see here the total money supply goes from $45.3 billion to $73.26 billion. That's less than a 110% increase in industrial production and other goods and services that were being produced at the time. So we see here that we have the exact same setup, or not exact, but we have basically the same qualitative setup as Elon Musk is proposing in his tweet, that the money supply will grow less than the supply of goods and services. Back then in the 20s, it was the Industrial Revolution, or the Industrial Revolution really revving up, and oil coming onto the scene and all that other stuff. So we have here an increase, a less than doubling of the money supply and a more than doubling of industrial production. And still, we had the worst depression ever in the history of the United States. And what was happening to consumer prices in the 1920s? Well, we see here, this is also relatively honest money. 1920s, about $21 an ounce, measured in gold. And what happened here is that consumer prices did not really change that much throughout the decade. They were going down. This is relative to the World War I era, and this is the effects of the after effects of the post World War I depression that ended in 1921, and the lingering effects were 1922. But if you look at these numbers generally, above here, above zero, below zero, above zero, below zero, consumer prices did not change much at all in the 1920s. They were pretty stable. And what was happening to consumer prices in the 1930s? Well, this is less honest because FDR changed money or changed the dollar from $21 to $35 an ounce. And you can see the effect of that here from prices falling in the Great Depression to prices rising over here in the mid 1930s. But that was mostly because of the inflation of the dollar from 21 to 35. So these bars are not honest. We can just say generally they're even. So prices did not change that much at all in the 1930s either. And here you have just one picture that I was able to find quickly of farmers dumping milk in the streets because there were too much production. There was too much production in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and they started dumping their products because the prices were too low, because there was too much production. The problem of inflation is not necessarily that consumer prices go up, though that is a problem. The problem is it messes up the entire structure of production and ends up producing things or signaling producers to produce things that people do not, in the end, really need or want, and not producing things that they really do need or want. And you end up with inflated industries producing garbage that make people sick and make people die. And then in the end, you have a Soylent Green community, a Soylent Green society where nobody has to do anything. It's a nirvana. It's a Garden of Eden where people just sit around all day until they die, eating Soylent Green. And when they die, they turn into Soylent Green to feed the next round of people. The answer is we need honest money. And honest money allows entrepreneurs and everyone else in the structure of production to produce what people actually want. It gives correct price signals, which are not always listened to accurately, and that's why people lose money. But eventually they filter through the economy so that goods and services can be provided equitably for as many people as possible. That is the free market, and it will not be improved by government checks being handed out in an era of AI. It will only make it worse. It's not a question of how much is produced by AI, but what is produced by AI. And the only way that AI can get those signals is through prices. And the only way you can have accurate prices is through honest money, not credit being handed out by a corrupt government who hands it out to its cronies so that they can create an education industrial complex and a medical industrial complex and a war industrial complex that just siphons off resources and makes people poor and ending up eating nothing but Soylent Green and dying a painless death and living an empty life. And if you don't want an empty life, then check out the Endgame Investor on Substack.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.